Exactly. All right, Mr. Bernstein, you want to kick us off?
Hey guys.
Mr. Bernstein, take it away.
Yes, here we are. It's the January 27th Tinderbox meetup with Michael Becker. I'm Mark Bernstein, the designer of Tinderbox. The AI companion is on. If you're not already on the Eastgate email list where we announce new meetups and releases, sign up at eastgate.com or the Tinderbox homepage. Tinderbox meetup announcements, recordings, and summaries are all available at the Tinderbox forum, which is also a great place to get questions answered, forum.eastgate.com. There's an online calendar. You can subscribe and get new meetups updated automatically to your local calendar. We'll put the URL in the chat. Next Sunday, we've got a great guest, hypertext research legend Kathy Marshall. Most recently, Kathy's been writing a biography of beat poet Joan Vollmer, who was killed, probably murdered, by William S. Burroughs. Her birthday, incidentally, is also February 4th. Kathy's also writing an important new book about data and the ways big data is simply not enough, so don't miss next week. And now, without further delay, here's Michael Becker.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, January 27th meetup. Super excited. Can't believe the month's over for us, but not a problem. So typically the way we handle our meetup formats is we go around the room and
You're breaking up, Michael.
we'll talk about projects. Sorry, guys, bad internet connection. I can only do what I can do. We then talk about projects and what people are working on. And then if we have a theme, we dig into that theme. So today there is no theme. So we'll just jump right into whatever we may want to be talking about. And I see a new person. I cannot pronounce your name, though. Quiko Moya? How do I pronounce your name? And you want to introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about what you're working on and why you're showing up today.
Yes, Kiko is how you pronounce it. It's a short form of Francisco. You can also call me Francisco if it's easier to remember.
Kiko.
Yes. And I'm a software engineer. I make phones for the iPhone, but I do also many other things. And I've been an intermittent Tinderbox user for many years already. And the problem is that I forget everything from time like every. So I'm now here to refresh my memory and also to get inspired about what you guys are doing here. So happy to be here.
All right. And do you have any particular inspiration of your own? Like, do you have a new project coming up, or new problem to be solved? I mean, why today versus say a month ago or 2 months from now?
Well, I renewed my license yesterday.
Okay, that's always a good reason.
I don't know. I believe so. I tried all the things and the tools for Thought Universe, but there is something about Tinderbox that I find non-replicable anywhere else. And I'm always very busy. It's very difficult for me to make sense of who I am or what my life is about. Recently, I started studying the great books at the University of Chicago. I'm in Spain, by the way. And so I'm Spanish also. And I just hope that I will be able to make sense of more things by using Tinderbox. So nothing really special, but that's
yeah. No, but I think you answered the question. You paid some money and now you want to get the most out of it. So awesome. So anybody else have any projects? Welcome to the community, by the way, and we're super excited to have you here. So anybody else have any thoughts, comments, questions, projects you're working on, things you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm working on a Bloom's taxonomy.
In particular?
Do you hear me at all? Hello?
Yep, go for it.
I'm saying there's a Bloom's taxonomy I've been working on Tinderbox.
Yep.
Trying to capture a like a curate, your 5 C's curate part. I've been working on this Bloom's taxonomy using like a Zettelkasten concept And I'd like to sort of show you what I've been doing a little bit, get into your videos and definitely checking out various toolings, prototypes and stuff. But I like to sort of just overview. I'm not an expert in Tinderbox, but it's a great tool. I'm learning it. So I think we have to really get into it to learn it. So it's really a good practice application project I'm working on to get into Tinderbox. So if you don't mind, I'd like to share my screen a little bit and get into it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And before you do though, before we do, just so we can set up the agenda for today, Frederick, you were
Sure.
about to say something. Can we? What did you want to review today?
Oh, it's something very simple. I could go just a second after he does this if you'd like. Or do you want me to do it now? I can tell you now. I'm doing something very silly with Tinderbox, but it's kind of interesting. I'm looking at an old Infocom game where you go in directions like north and south and explore. And I decided to do the map in Tinderbox, which I'm learning about links this way. And what I'm wondering is you get a fairly complicated map eventually with lots of links between the different notes. Is there a way to automatically lay it out better, or do you have to drag each node around to get the links to work properly? I've noticed that if I have two links, one forward and one reverse, they tend to display over each other, and I have to move the boxes to get the links to show both. And I'm just wondering, are there any tools for managing a map that has lots of links?
Sorry, guys, I got kicked off the internet, so I missed everything that Frederick was talking about.
Oh, okay. Did you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
So I'll do it even in a briefer way. I'm
Okay.
exploring an Infocom game, which is an old text-based adventure where you navigate through a virtual space, if you will. And I'm using nodes in notes in Tinderbox to record where I am in the map, right? And these usually you have directions like north, south, east, and west, and so on to go from place to place. And so I'm recording that in Tinderbox just for the fun of it and using the links to show it graphically in the map view. And my question, and it works really great, actually. My question, even though it's a silly application, and my question is when you get a map with lots and lots of nodes with lots and lots of links between them in all kinds of ways, I'm dragging the notes around to get the links to show visually in a nice way. Is there a tool in Tinderbox that does automatic layout or anything like that? I haven't found it, but maybe it exists, and it's not important, but I just thought I'd mention it.
A couple of
Well,
things.
there's a couple. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
A couple of things do occur.
Sorry,
to
Mark,
me.
go ahead.
Sure. One, Michael Bywater, who wrote the Infocom Hitchhikers Guide to the Galaxy, used to be a very big Tinderbox user. I haven't heard from him in a year or two, but it would be this would be an interesting question for him. Two, check out the broad link type, which works quite nicely for links that overlap with links. The links are large and translucent and make a better distinction between forwards and backwards. Three, in things like the Infocom game, being able to go from a room north to another room usually, though not always, implies being able to go in the reverse direction. So I would be tempted if to simply have links imply that the reverse link exists, unless you assign a special type to it to show that it really is one directional, and make those give those a name and make them red or something. And that will simplify the problem a lot. You can distinguish overlaying links in the Tinderbox map because they have arrows at both ends. So that will help. But you're right. If you arrange the rooms orthogonally, which is what you would normally want to do, then the links are going to nearly lie on top of each other. And there are, you can drag
And
link
Mark,
anchors.
do you think,
Hmm? Go ahead.
I was thinking, do you think hyperbolic view could help in this situation? Because then you could suppress and.
I couldn't get into hyperbolic view. It seems to be grayed out. I don't know. Maybe I don't have the right setup or something. But when I was in the map view, I can't get into hyperbolic view.
You need to select a place to be the focus, typically the starting point, and that will disable hyperbolic view. Always assuming that there are links from it. Remember, hyperbolic view is a
So if you click it,
visualization tool. You have to have a selected focus,
so if
and
you
it
click
has to have
note that
links.
right. So if you click,
Okay, great. I don't know if you can hear me, but Mark, thank you. That's great, and it's really fun to try to do this with Infocom. It's interesting.
Very good. So Kim Peterson, you had something to show.
Yeah, I want to share my screen a little bit, just to backdrop on this concept. This is Bloom's taxonomy. Can you see my screen by chance? The major
Yes.
types and subtypes of knowledge. Well, when you do a PhD, I think Michael's finished his up, you have to do a written exam. And so they gave me an exam. They said, work on, I forget what the question was, describe the complexity science of blah, 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 blah. But within the Bloom's taxonomy mindset, right? So that's not easy. Seemed like it's very simple, but when you look at Bloom's taxonomy, you have two different areas you look at. You look at the actual knowledge area, which is right. I'm sharing my screen. This is the factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge, metacognition knowledge, right? But also there's the cognitive side. Well, what do you do with it? Well, you have to remember the knowledge, understand the knowledge, apply, synthesize, evaluate, and create the knowledge, right? So each one of these things, you get the factual knowledge. Well, you really have to remember, understand, apply. Then you actually create the conceptual knowledge. You have to remember, understand. So you got these 5 layers of cognitive knowledge of behavior that you have to apply to each one of these steps of knowledge, right? And it's not easy. So and there's keywords. So you have to make sure that you identify your concepts per keyword. Then you start getting, once you get your factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge down on your complexity concept, right? Whatever I was using, you would then actually use keywords to actually start your next paragraph to indicate that you use some Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, this guy is using keywords. He's definitely applying stuff. And so that's how I did my PhD. But I'm thinking, how would I apply this in like a real life situation if I really want to break down using a Zettelkasten, and I want to understand Stacy here, Ralph Stacy, and some of his concepts, which has a lot of meat and potatoes on it. I really want to get into this knowledge type of thing, this knowledge concept, where I want to really learn the factual knowledge of what he's talking about. But then I really want to get into, which is the knowledge of terminology, specific details. Maybe I need a little bit of this, and then I actually have to get that before I get conceptual. I really have to get the factual, so it's sequential. You have to get A, then you have to get B and C. Then I want to learn Stacy about his knowledge of classifications and principles, and then I want to also get into procedure knowledge, what he's talking about, and then get into the metacognition knowledge as well. So I created this Zettelkasten concept, and I use prototypes. Again, I'm a new guy here in this phenomenal tool called Tinderbox, and I created some prototypes here, and I signed them for the sake of just trying to segmentate my knowledge. So I've got general references up here that I'll put in when I start doing some more research. I do have Stacy up here. I'll have more people up here that I want to break down, but I want to actually somewhat connect this information. Once I create some of these notes in here, I want to make sure, I guess Frederick talked about links. That's the question. I have to maybe create some links. Once I start getting into my concept here, I want to make sure I identify some concepts, some factual knowledge. I want to make sure I link it down here to conceptual knowledge, so I have a library of this knowledge base, the factual and conceptual. I want to make sure I have a sequenced type of environment, which I can reference, and then I try to apply it over here. I got the knowledge, but then I have to start trying to remember it, understand it. So this is another challenge for me. But what you just have to get the knowledge first, get these 4 knowledge bases, and then take it away. So basically, that's what I've come up with. I use some prototypes here. I guess you can put in some keywords if you want to take like a general factual knowledge and take a PDF and drop it in there. I guess the keywords would filter that out. But that's where I'm kind of not stuck. It's just an exploration of knowledge management, learning the Tinderbox tooling. And Michael's videos are phenomenal, by the way. Good stuff on that, man. It's just like it's great in understanding the scripting and stuff. So this is where I want to get into a little bit, where I can take it, trying to really get the actual knowledge in, break something down into a four bases. And some of this knowledge you might not have procedural, but how to break down knowledge, how to understand it. Eventually you have to understand it, synthesize it over here. But how can I use this type of concept? Maybe Zettelkasten isn't the way to go, but I don't know. What do you think? Anybody have any ideas?
Yeah, my general reaction is, you want to think about how are you going to go. Again, I always start with ultimately what's my outcome? Like, what do I want to get out of all of this? Because then that determines what kind of assets I want to build or develop.
Well, you want to get permanent nodes. You want to create permanent nodes. Eventually, I said you want to probably with Zettelkasten concepts, you want to get all these concepts together and then create new content. Curate. This is like a curation process. Your curation process broken all the way down to like 4 knowledge areas. But eventually, you want to take this knowledge and start creating new knowledge called with permanent nodes, and take the Zettelkasten to the next level of creating content. Basically, new content. That makes any sense?
So go ahead, Frederick.
So I don't understand why these things like procedural knowledge, conceptual knowledge, and so on aren't attributes that would apply to anything that you're dealing with. Why are they separate things on the map? Or is this knowledge about these things? I'm not sure whether you're trying to record facts about the knowledge dimension and make a map about that, or whether you're trying to apply that to something entirely different, in which case I'm not sure why attributes wouldn't be the right thing to do.
Yeah, I guess you could put, how would you, for example, if you want to break something down from factual knowledge and you get into this one concept, you have to really start understanding the terminology and specific details. You really have to get into the factual knowledge first before you get into conceptual knowledge. And then with procedural knowledge. According to the Blooms, this is the way to study. Your brain kind of works this way a little bit. It could be different with other people, but he's saying that you really have to get the factual knowledge first to really get into the conceptual. You have to understand the terminology first. And so that's why I broke it down. When I get into a concept like Ralph here, Stacy, maybe I should get into his factual knowledge and learn it, break it down first and create some notes. And then once I get that down, I want to go into maybe conceptual knowledge. What is Stacy talking about conceptual knowledge? I have my factual notes here. Then I want to build another note off of that into conceptual. With variables, I guess you could. But how would you segmentate the variables in different areas? You have one. I don't know how to understand that works. I'm not a Tinderbox guy, but how would you do that with variables within? I don't know. Variables up here. Each one of these could have various variables, factual knowledge. But when you, I guess maybe I was trying to segmentate the knowledge too much into these areas. But
I don't know. I'm thinking if you have a concept of large language models, then ChatGPT is an example of that, and that's more, what did you call it? Factual, but the concept might come first that you're dealing with large language models. And so I'm trying to figure out if you were modeling that, for example, how that would work with what you have here.
Yeah, I don't know. But I think what I'm trying to do here, once I get the factual knowledge in there, link it to the conceptual, get a link to the conceptual, and keep going, building out this knowledge, these four knowledge bases here, and then start creating new knowledge. Trying to, definitely do a cognitive dump and try to understand it and synthesize it. And then from there, you can create maybe new knowledge from this. Once you get into Stacy and break everything down, understand what he's talking about, apply it into a new knowledge base, a new type of knowledge. The Zettelkasten way of connecting, linking notes, and then you come up with a new idea, right? That's my main goal. I mean, once you break this thing down, curate this thing down to like a forensic type of concept here, which I kind of apologize thinking of creation, Michael, but I need to break it down more. I need more information to actually, before I put out new knowledge, new information, I need to break it down and know what I'm talking about. Definitely, if you're a PhD, really have to know your stuff here. And I think this, for me, this really helps me be more of an expert in my area, whatever I'm trying to do. This type of process might help others as well. But I just want to share with everybody. But I think the linking, I think. Frederick, you're linking in the creation of this, the tooling which supports linking. You help me. I can link stuff here with factual knowledge, link it to conceptual, and keep growing that way. And then eventually, once I have the links, I can study it and then create new knowledge.
Okay. Well, again, my reaction is I think you're too much in your head right now. So if I were you, I would just start creating notes. So, think about the term, if I look at knowledge of terminology is like one of them, that first one. So just start create a prototype called terms and start just creating notes of all of the terminology that you need to learn. And then you can organize and say, all right, well then how do these terms aggregate up into broader categories? So then you can, using attributes as Frederick suggested and or links, you can then start having those terms roll up to generalized categories. So these terms actually fall into one of these three categories. And then you can say, now these three
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. Yeah, I get it. So what
category
you
actually roll up to creating this as you look.
Yeah. Okay. I get what you're saying. So break things down and start connecting at this level, at the terminology level, and then eventually the variables will get into classification and just start building out your map that way. But get it started first of all just with terminology, and then it'll naturally build out into the actual conceptual variables and build out into procedural variables.
Well, yeah. And what I recommend is just like allow yourself to be curious. Right? Every new concept, create a note for that concept and then start writing about what you're learning that concept.
Right.
What I would also encourage you to do is, using attributes, make sure you maintain, citations and references and links so that as those notes evolve, you can always kind of, go back to their origin. Where did that idea come?
Yeah, exactly. So maybe let me go back and look at this. So we're not going to really put this into categorization over here. I'm not going to have notes here and notes here. You can actually start fresh and not use this type of concept.
Yeah, but I'd also encourage you to think about too, how are you distinguishing actual conceptual knowledge? For me, in some way, those in fact could be the same thing. A concept is a fact, and factual knowledge is a fact. So actually, what do you mean by factual knowledge? Do you mean statistics and numbers? Do you mean evidence-based discourse? Or because a concept is a fact of somebody's idea.
Yeah.
So
it's ambiguous.
I would start by really thinking about how. Yeah, it's ambiguous. So I would start by how are you categorizing in your mind your notes, and what do these categories mean to you? And the other thing
Yeah,
I would
exactly.
find helpful, and again, this is why I always start the outcome. This is why when I always start with the mindset of a teacher, like I'm going to learn this stuff ultimately with the intention to be able to teach somebody else. So what would I need somebody else to know about this topic at the end of the day for me to be
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Keep the perspective is what you're trying to say, the end result and what you're trying to, yeah. Well, yeah, this is Bloom's taxonomy is created for creating exams based upon the actual knowledge and the actual cognitive knowledge over here as well, how you apply it. And you create teaching objectives, you know, testing and stuff. So this is created for that. But you read Bloom's information, just to digress here a little bit, he definitely talks about what you use for other things as well. I don't think knowledge management was really called KM back then, but he kind of describes using this type of taxonomy or ontology, whatever, as a way to learn and kind of classify the information. But yeah, it's a good idea. So get into it and start. Maybe too much analysis paralysis here. Get into it, start doing the terminology, and try to define what you mean by factual and conceptual. But just get into it. But so this is my framework. This is my framework I'm trying to work on, and get into. And it's a great project to get into learning the tooling of Tinderbox, which. And the goal is to create new knowledge. Basically, that's what I'm trying to do. Get these concepts and these theories of various people, and maybe create some new stuff. You know. But anyway, you gave me some great ideas. Let's, if you don't mind, I'd like to move on with other people's topics. But I'll definitely come back to it. You know. Hope I didn't bore anybody.
perfect. Yeah, no, I love Bloom's work. I think it's really interesting. So, you know, obviously I always have something to talk about, but does anybody else have any other thoughts, ideas, inspirations, things that they want to share?
One thing I'd be interested in hearing, perhaps in future meetups, is people's use of the new table view. I've not seen a whole lot of table views yet, and I'd be very interested. So even if you think your use of the table view is really obvious or superficial or dull, I think it would be really interesting to take a look sometime, just at what it's being used for.
So, Mark, just to react on that really quickly, for me, I used it the other day to get a comma delimited roster of my students in a class, so that so I could then get their name, the breakout room they were in, and then be able to upload that comma delimited list up into Zoom, so that Zoom could then automatically populate my students into their breakout rooms. So it sounds super
neat.
simple. Yeah, it sounds super stupid simple, but it saved me 20 minutes and it took like 30 seconds. So that was a great example of how I used it. Another way I've used it is to look at use an agent to pull all of the images and figures and tables in my report across a 200-page report, sort them by outline view, and then be able to manually renumber them, because my automatic numbering wasn't working and I didn't have time to futz with getting my automation working. So I shut all the automation down, pulled up table view, got all the tables or all the figures in the right order, and then used that to be able to renumber them. And that was, again, that saved me tons of time.
Very nice.
Okay. Anybody else have any other comments, thoughts, ideas?
I've got a question, and I suspect the answer may be no, but I'll ask in case. Has anyone created RDF data out of a Tinderbox? So this
Oh,
is
first
this
and
is doing-
foremost,
this
what is
doing linked
RDF?
data. Sorry, so I think that's a resource data format. It's basically the really eye-bleedingly difficult to read XML that's used in linked data. The backstory to this is a while back I made a effectively citation. I tracked all the citations within a conference, happens to be the hypertext conference. I did it in a Tinderbox document. And I did that because I wanted to look at citation information in a clean set of data. And it turns out that most publishers don't clean their data. So I started with something I could get my hands around, cleaned it up, put it in what I regard as a trusted set of data, which I did in Tinderbox. And I used that to make some stuff in things like Gephi by exporting node and edge tables, which so that was back in Tinderbox 5, I think, and which led to some things that you can now do. So, for instance, to make an edge table, you're trying to find for every note, you're basically trying to track all the in and outbound links and write them out as basically an ID table. ID X goes to Y, Z, whatever. Anyway, so that's basically tab delim tables. Then somebody asked me, that's fine, but I want it in JSON. So I did that recently for a research project that somebody was doing. They wanted the subject matter, they wanted the data, but they wanted it in JSON, which makes sense in today's world. Which was interesting because it turned out that wasn't quite how I'd written I constructed the Tinderbox, so that it meant that to do the cross-linking between the JSON objects, where this thing needs to know it basically links to ID whatever, involved me doing thousands and thousands of queries. My mistake, but it's an interesting learning thing. Anyway, somebody just asked me, said, that's really cool, but actually what I really want is linked data. So I'm just about finished the ontology for the linked data, but I've got to write it. Well, if you've ever looked at linked data in the raw, it's not something humans were ever meant to see. So I just wonder if anyone had plotted this path before.
No, because I didn't even know the character term you said at the very beginning. So no, for me.
So if you see, where might you see? It used to be something like things like if you ever went into the metadata section of something, Adobe Photoshop, and you'd see all these weird little fields saying so like XAF colon name. Basically, what it allows you to do, the idea of linked data is this idea of basically being able to calculate across a graph, a network. So you have all these bits of information that are linked, and you have all this reasoning says if I'm a person, I have the attribute name. If I'm an organization, I have the attribute location. And you can, because it's all connected, you can do all sorts of inference across it. And then you can do all sorts of transforms on top of that. And the cleverness of today's computers, you can begin to do really interesting visualizations. And the project I'm involved in is actually looking at work in XR, in extended reality. So think of it like basically semi 3D, but where, for instance, you can move beyond the straitjacket of a print document, and you can think of the document as a set of information. So instead of trying to read, say, the straitjacket of an academic PDF, where you've taken all this knowledge, squeezed it into a really tight straitjacket of a format, and then the reader has to unsqueeze it to make sense of it, you could just say, here's the data, right? Yeah, you show me the citation tree, show me the temporal axis of this work, show me the data that actually lies behind the poster that is that figure. And that could be live data, and you can do all of that. But it really then helps to have tractable information. So that's why I'm exploring some of these data formats. And I hasten to add, I know nothing about it. So it's very much the blind leading himself.
Awesome.
Michael, that's absolutely fascinating that linked data, RDF linked data apparently is new terminology. This comes from the 9/11 when the intelligence community was caught with their pants down. And so they've been pouring buckets of money for even before, into connecting the dots. And the distinction is called the semantic web. And Mark, because we have to blame the Brits on this, because this is Tim Berners-Lee, put out his net of after linking thing. Well, linked data is about linking things. It is not about semantics. It is not about meaning. It is mathematical linking. How do you prove that mathematically this set and that set are connected? But it has nothing to do with semantics. And I saw Tim Berners-Lee himself state that semantic web is a sexy marketing label. Linked data was not sexy.
Yeah, and it never took off. It never, because the one thing that all the technologists forgot to do was to make a human compatible visualization there for it. So it's really cool technology, but the number of people who actually can work with it is remarkably few.
The Pentagon is patient and has lots of money. So
but it's pertinent. I mean, another project I'm involved in at the moment is looking at it's basically a national infrastructure for reuse of data. So you know, the public purse pays all this money, and what you get out of it, if you're lucky, at paper, and everything else just goes to a hard drive to die. And so people say this is stupid. So they're trying to do a discovery infrastructure, but actually, it turns out that most stuff is not only trapped in the sort of lossy form of a PDF, but it's actually it's stuck within basically relational databases, which have keyword whack-a-mole search on the top. So you can't discover across the piece. So you might want to know if someone in the next lab over is working on the same molecule as you. It won't help, say, someone who's working, you know, sitting in Washington or London or Paris or wherever, saying, is anyone in this country working on this substance? Won't help you at all. So it's a whole skein of discovery tools that are missing, and linked data possibly may slide round again to provide that missing thing. We don't have the tools. We don't even have particularly the skilled people to do it. But I don't. At the moment, it seems tractable as an approach.
Mark, I would.
By the way, go ahead, Frederick.
I was just going to say you might want to look at JSON LD.
Yeah, I mean, JSON LD is. You're right. I mean, JSON LD is another way of representing the linked part of the data, another instantiation of it. At the moment, I'm just trying to take. The reason I'm looking at the data set I have is I know it really well. So I've spent 7 years probably quite closely interacting with this again and rubbing out the human errors that went into its creation, which is actually, funnily enough, has proved to be remarkably useful. Because every time someone says, why don't you just use? I'm thinking, how is that actually going to work? Because your conceptual idea is wonderful, but your conceptual idea has no actual data in it. When you put most of these systems up to real human data, which is messy and incomplete and all sorts of things, they tend to fail fast and badly. So that's sort of why I'm again looking at this, because it actually provides an interesting real world test case to some really interesting intellectual ideas. You know, and the semantic web was a great idea, never took off. I don't think it's a bad idea. I just think it's badly implemented and badly sold. So we may get something back out of the long grass yet.
Well, honestly, and let me just pause on that. So I now realize I have heard of the term before, but I forgot.
Suffice it to say, if I sort of come up with any useful insights or templates or something, it'll doubtless make its way to the forum ere long. I just saw Mark's comment. I mean, I was genuinely surprised when I started looking at sort of citation data. There were some obvious errors that you'd expect. So, you know, back in the 90s, if you had a name with an accented character, well, you know, computers couldn't really cope. We weren't that advanced. But you know, we're past that now. We can do that. But it turns out it's somebody else's job to go back and fix all 20 years worth of data that's broken because it doesn't link to the right person or it can't identify them. And there are a number of large things. You have the world of science, you have DBLP and all these things. But in fact, when you look at it, it is sadly the case that they all basically go back to the original publisher, be it a professional society or a commercial entity. And if the publisher didn't get it right or doesn't actually triage their data, then all is for naught, because the crap just flows downhill. And it's also remarkably difficult to get a genuine erratum fixed in an academic paper. And I don't mean you're arguing about the data in it. Just said you've actually got the author's name wrong. It can take about 6 months if you're lucky. Partly because these systems are supposed to work, you obviously need no staff to deal with the errors that you're never going to have. So you can figure it out from there.
So it's interesting, Mark, as you were talking, when David Eddy brought up Tim Berners-Lee, I did realize I actually hadn't heard of the term RDF. And he's using RDF as the foundation of his solid infrastructure, which is part of a company called Interrupt. And solid is becoming the new standard for the through the W3C for self-sovereign identity management across the internet. And it's that linking of personal data and identity across entities within the internet, but giving me the primary node of the owner of that data control over all of it. That's what Tim's project is. So it's funny how all these little pieces are starting to flow together, which also makes me think of your buddy in Australia, Ted Goranson, who is combining set theory with category theory, and category theory being more of what you're talking about, meaning that, what we don't care about node A and node B actually linking together. What we care about is all of the semantic links between node A and node B, and the direction of those links and the weights of those links. And that really is it's the in between the two nodes is where insight and knowledge and life happens, not the very nature of the nodes themselves. Yeah. And that's what I've been learning through this process as well. Yeah. And Kim Peterson, that kind of insight would help you, I think, with your Bloom's work. But
an interesting thing that it's a good point that comes out. It's really interesting. When I started doing the stuff on the hypertexting conference stuff, is one of the first things that, why don't you put in all the organizations that people work for? Because then underpants name style, I'll have an idea, blank, and then I'll have, good thing will come out of it. Because what this overlooks is people change their names infrequently. People change their organizations a lot. If you have a paper written by 7 people all in different organizations, where did that intellectual insight occur? So now your geographical map is a bit stuffed, because you can't map one thing onto 7 places. And it just shows how some of these things that in our mind's eye we deal with quite flexibly in here, but they don't actually work particularly well once abstracted into the hard-edged nature of software code.
Awesome. Okay. So anybody else have any other thoughts, comments, ideas? If not, I've got one. Taking notes here. So before I take over, does anybody else want to throw something else out there, or I'll share an idea? Okay, you want me to share an idea? All right, let's do it. Okay, so I'm going to apologize in advance if my internet cuts out. It's because even when you're in paradise, sometimes your internet doesn't work. So I will be back within 30 seconds or so if it cuts out. So on the forum, we had a community member reach out a day or so ago saying, I've placed a bunch of images in my TBX file. How do I export them? And the other requirement he had was, I want the export file to be Markdown, and that the Markdown file maintains and has a path to the image. And it's, you know, and so I this morning I kind of spent about 45 minutes prior to today's meetup and kind of came up with an approach on how he might manage that. And I want to share that approach. So let me again summarize it really quick. Did you all freeze on me? Oh no, you didn't. Mark Anderson's still moving around. So let me summarize again the issue. So he has a Tinderbox file and he's copying and pasting images into the Tinderbox file. And then he wants to be able to export the images that are in his Tinderbox file out of Tinderbox and export the image out of Tinderbox and have Tinderbox export the image out of itself into a container, and then have that Markdown file have the path to that image. So as I was thinking about his approach or his problem, I was doing my morning meditation and it popped into my head and I couldn't get rid of it. And I finally kind of had the insight of doing it. And I'm going to harken back to Mark Anderson, who will often say,